Professor Klaxon stood in his empty lecture hall, staring at the 3 students who'd bothered to show up for advanced xenobiology. 3, out of a class that was supposed to have 47 enrolled beings from across the galaxy. Well, he muttered to himself, adjusting his 7 spectacles with 4 different tentacles, this is just fantastic. The Zentorian in the front row was openly sleeping, her crystalline head producing soft, chiming sounds that somehow made Klaxon feel even more depressed. The blob creature from Sector 7 had literally melted into a puddle of boredom, and the enthusiastic young Vraxian was only there because xenobiology was a required course for his waste management degree. Klaxon's career was circling the drain faster than a Plutonian space toilet, and he knew it. 20 years of tenure at the Galactic Academy, and this is what it had come to. His colleagues whispered behind his back about his outdated teaching methods and failure to engage modern students. The dean had already scheduled a meeting for next week, and Klaxon was pretty sure it wasn't to discuss a raise. "Professor," called the Vraxian, raising one of his 6 arms, "when you said Earth creatures were interesting, did you mean interesting like a tax audit or interesting like a plague outbreak?" "Neither, Grothnix," Klaxon sighed. "Earth fauna represents one of the most diverse and fascinating ecosystems in the known galaxy. Their predators have evolved incredible hunting strategies that make our own world's creatures look like amateur hour." The Zentorian's chiming got louder. She was probably having pleasant dreams about literally anywhere else. That's when inspiration struck Klaxon like a meteorite to the cerebral cortex. Why was he showing them boring holographic projections and dusty specimens when he could bring them face to face with a real, live Earth predator? The kind of experience that would have students lining up around the space station to get into his class. The kind of demonstration that would save his career. "Computer," he announced to the empty room, "access the Galactic Trade Registry and locate the nearest Earth vessel." "Located," the computer replied in its annoyingly cheerful voice. "Human cargo vessel Murphy's Law is currently docked at Bay 94, scheduled for supply delivery." Perfect. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as the species crazy enough to keep dangerous animals as companions. If anyone could help him acquire a proper Earth predator for educational purposes, it would be them. Meanwhile, in Bay 94, Captain Jake Murphy was having his own problems. "I'm telling you, Mr. Whiskers, we can't stay here long," Jake said, scratching behind the ears of the 20-pound orange tabby cat currently occupying his captain's chair. "This is supposed to be a quick supply drop, not a vacation." And Mr. Whiskers opened one green eye, gave Jake a look that clearly communicated his opinion of Jake's scheduling priorities, and went back to sleep. Jake had inherited both the cargo ship and the cat from his uncle, along with a delivery route that took him to the weird corners of the galaxy where beings actually wanted Earth products. Apparently, human-made duct tape was considered a luxury item in the Andromeda sector, and Earth coffee was classified as a mild narcotic in 17 different star systems. The cat had come with the ship, and after 3 years of space travel together, Jake had learned that Mr. Whiskers was the real captain. Jake just handled the flying and the paperwork. "Attention, Captain Murphy," came the announcement over his comm system. "You have a visitor requesting permission to board, Professor Klaxon from the Galactic Academy." Jake frowned. He wasn't expecting any customs inspections, and his cargo manifest was clean. Well, mostly clean. There was that thing with the coffee, but he had proper permits for that. Send him up, I guess. 5 minutes later, Professor Klaxon materialized in Jake's cargo bay, all 7 feet of tentacled academic enthusiasm. "Captain Murphy," Klaxon announced, spreading 4 arms in what Jake assumed was a gesture of greeting. "I have a proposition that could benefit us both tremendously." Jake looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who had followed him to the cargo bay and was now investigating a particularly interesting dust mote. "If this is about that coffee shipment to the Rigel system, I swear those permits are legitimate." "Oh, no, Klaxon waved dismissively. "I'm here about something far more important. I understand that humans often keep Earth's most dangerous predators as companions." Jake blinked. "Come again?" "Your apex predators, the creatures that sit at the top of Earth's food chain. I need one for a demonstration to my students." Jake looked down at Mr. Whiskers again. The cat was now lying on his back, batting lazily at the same dust mote. "You want to borrow a predator?" "Exactly. Something that will truly showcase the terrifying efficiency of Earth's evolutionary masterpiece. The kind of creature that strikes fear into the hearts of its prey through sheer, predatory magnificence." Mr. Whiskers chose that moment to sneeze, which somehow made him roll completely over and bump into Jake's boot. The cat looked mildly offended by this turn of events. Right, Jake said slowly. And you think I just happened to have one of these terrifying creatures lying around? Well, Klaxon said, looking around the cargo bay hopefully. Don't you? What happened next was a perfect storm of technological failure, academic desperation, and cosmic irony that would be talked about in xenobiology circles for generations to come. Professor Klaxon, being a thorough academic, had done his research. Unfortunately, his research had been conducted using the Academy's aging computer system, which had suffered a massive data corruption event 3 years ago during what was officially called the Great Digital Hiccup of 2387. Computer, Klaxon had asked earlier, identify Earth's apex predator. The computer, drawing from its corrupted files, had confidently declared, Earth's apex predator is the Felis catus, a stealth hunter known for its psychological warfare tactics, ability to manipulate larger species, and complete disregard for the laws of physics. The entry had gone on to describe these creatures as small but deadly, masters of ambush tactics, and capable of controlling human behavior through subsonic manipulation. It had even included a note about their hypnotic stare and weapons-grade purring system. Of course, what the computer had actually done was combine a legitimate scientific article about cats with several corrupted files about military tactics, a bad translation of a human comedy sketch, and someone's very sarcastic research paper titled, How My Cat Conquered My Household, a Study in Domestic Terrorism. But Klaxon didn't know that. So, Jake said, still trying to figure out what this tentacled professor actually wanted. You're looking for a predator demonstration. Precisely. Something that will show my students the raw, primal terror that Earth's evolutionary masterpiece can inspire. Jake glanced down at Mr. Whiskers, who had given up on the dust mote and was now grooming his own foot with the dedication of a professional athlete. And you want to use my, companion here? Exactly! Klaxon's voice rose with excitement. I can see why you keep such a creature close. The way it moves with such calculated precision, the way it surveys its environment for potential threats and opportunities. Magnificent. Jake watched Mr. Whiskers lose his balance while trying to lick his own back and topple over sideways. Yeah, he's something special, all right. The universal translator in Jake's earpiece started making weird crackling sounds, which usually meant it was trying to translate something that didn't have a direct equivalent. This happened a lot when talking to academics who insisted on using unnecessarily complicated words. I must ask, Klaxon continued, how do you maintain control over such a dangerous specimen? The literature suggests these creatures are known for their psychological dominance over larger species. Jake looked at Mr. Whiskers, who was now staring intently at absolutely nothing, pupils dilated like he'd seen the secrets of the universe in the corner of the cargo bay. Oh, you know, it's all about respect and understanding, Jake said, because that seemed like the kind of thing people said about pets. He pretty much does whatever he wants, and I just try to keep him fed and happy. Klaxon's eyes lit up with all 7 of his spectacles. Ah, the classic pack hierarchy. You've established yourself as the beta, allowing the apex predator to maintain its dominant position while providing resources. Brilliant adaptation strategy. Sure, that's exactly what it is. The universal translator crackled again, and Jake was starting to suspect it was having some kind of breakdown. Either that, or this professor was completely insane. The Academy would be honored to host a demonstration, Klaxon said, practically vibrating with excitement. We would, of course, provide proper compensation for your time and expertise. Jake's ears perked up at the word compensation. Space fuel wasn't free, and Mr. Whiskers had expensive taste in cat food. The fancy stuff from the hydroponic stations cost more per pound than some precious metals. What kind of compensation are we talking about? Standard Academy rates for guest experts. 5,000 credits, plus accommodations and meals. Jake nearly choked. 5,000 credits was more than he made on most cargo runs, and all he had to do was let some alien college students look at his cat. And all I have to do is bring Mr. Whiskers to your class? Mr. Whiskers! Klaxon exclaimed, making note-taking gestures with 2 of his tentacles. What a deceptively innocent designation for such a formidable predator. The psychological impact of that name alone must be devastating to your enemies. Oh, absolutely devastating, Jake said, watching Mr. Whiskers attack his own tail. He chose the name himself, actually. Very intimidating process. This was completely true. Jake's uncle had told him the cat had shown up at the spaceport one day, walked onto the ship, and refused to leave. The name tag said, Mr. Whiskers, so that's what they'd called him. Jake had always assumed some kid had named him, but if this professor wanted to believe it was part of some elaborate psychological warfare strategy, who was Jake to argue? Remarkable. The creature chose its own psychological warfare designation. I knew Earth predators were sophisticated, but this level of strategic thinking is unprecedented. Mr. Whiskers had successfully caught his own tail and was now biting it with the expression of someone who couldn't quite figure out why this was happening to him. Yeah, he's a real tactical genius, Jake said. So when do you want to do this demonstration? 24 hours later, Jake was beginning to regret his life choices. Now remember, Captain Murphy, Professor Claxon said for the 15th time, pacing around Jake's guest quarters with the nervous energy of someone who was either about to make academic history or become a cautionary tale. The safety of my students is paramount. You're absolutely certain you can control your apex predator during the demonstration? Jake looked over at Mr. Whiskers, who was currently sprawled across the provided alien furniture like he owned the place. The cat had taken one look at the fancy academy accommodations and immediately claimed the most expensive-looking chair as his new throne. Oh yeah, totally under control, Jake said, watching Mr. Whiskers knock a decorative crystal off the table just because he could. He's very professional. Meanwhile, in Lecture Hall 7, Klaxon was conducting what he'd dramatically called a critical safety briefing for his suddenly much larger class. Word had somehow gotten out that Professor Klaxon was bringing a live Earth predator to campus, and students were showing up from departments that hadn't even existed yesterday. Now then, Klaxon announced to the packed auditorium, tomorrow we will witness something unprecedented in Academy history, a live demonstration featuring one of Earth's most sophisticated predators. The audience was a fascinating mix of species, each bringing their own unique anxieties to the situation. Grothnik the Vraxian had done his own research and was convinced they were about to meet something like a miniature Tyrannosaurus Rex. He'd actually brought protective gear that looked suspiciously like medieval armor. "Professor," called out a nervous crystalline from the Vega system, her entire body structure flickering with anxiety. "My species evolved from prey animals. Should I be concerned about triggering predatory instincts?" Excellent question, Shimmerax. Earth predators are indeed known for their ability to identify vulnerable targets through subtle behavioral cues. I suggest maintaining calm confidence and avoiding any sudden movements. In the back row, a group of Vlob creatures from Sector 7 were having what appeared to be a heated debate about whether they should attend at all. Apparently, their entire species' survival strategy was based on being too boring to eat, and meeting an actual predator seemed counterproductive to this approach. "What about the psychological warfare aspect?" asked a Zentaurian whose crystalline head was chiming with nervous frequencies. "I've heard Earth predators can establish dominance through direct eye contact." "Ah yes, the hypnotic stare technique," Klaxon nodded enthusiastically. "Earth's apex predators are master manipulators. They can apparently induce a trance-like state in their targets, making them completely compliant to the predator's will." Back in his quarters, Jake was getting increasingly confused by the Academy staff's preparations. Someone had delivered what appeared to be a containment field generator. Another person had dropped off emergency medical supplies. A third had installed some kind of advanced air filtration system, apparently in case Mr. Whiskers released toxic pheromones. "Is all this really necessary?" Jake asked the technician who was calibrating the containment field. "Sir, according to our safety protocols, any demonstration involving a Class 7 apex predator requires full containment measures," the technician replied, adjusting his protective gear. "We can't be too careful with psychological warfare specialists." Jake watched Mr. Whiskers sleep peacefully in a sunbeam, occasionally twitching as he dreamed about whatever cats dream about, probably tuna, or that red dot that sometimes appeared on walls. Right, psychological warfare, got it. The most elaborate preparation was happening in the lecture hall itself. Klaxon had installed what he called multi-spectrum observation equipment, so students could analyze the predator's behavior from multiple angles. There were cameras, sensors, and monitoring devices that probably cost more than Jake's entire ship. "The beauty of this demonstration," Claxton explained to his teaching assistant, a long-suffering Rigelian named Blortox, "is that we'll be able to observe authentic predatory behavior in real time. No simulations, no recordings, just pure, unfiltered evolutionary mastery." "Professor," Blortox said carefully, "are you absolutely certain about the safety measures? Because if something goes wrong during this demonstration, the Dean will probably feed us to actual predators." "Nonsense. Captain Murphy assures me the creature is completely under his control. Besides, we have containment fields, emergency protocols, and a direct line to campus security." Blortox looked at the elaborate setup and wondered if his insurance policy covered death by Earth predator. Probably not, but at least his family would have an interesting story to tell. The final touch was Klaxon's pre-demonstration meal preparation. He'd researched Earth predator dietary requirements and had the Academy cafeteria prepare what he believed would be appropriate refreshments. Raw meat substitutes, various fish analogs, and several types of small prey simulation pellets, the cafeteria manager reported, plus some kind of liquid called milk that apparently has psychoactive properties for these creatures. Jake received the meal plan and had to sit down. "Mr. Whiskers," he said to the cat, "tomorrow, you're either going to be the most famous cat in the galaxy, or we're both going to be in a lot of trouble." Mr. Whiskers opened one eye, yawned, and went back to sleep. He had no idea that in 12 hours, he would be facing an audience of 200 terrified alien students who expected him to demonstrate the savage efficiency of Earth's evolutionary masterpiece. The stage was set for what would either be the greatest academic triumph in galactic history or the most embarrassing educational disaster since the great quantum physics miscalculation of 2381. The lecture hall was packed beyond capacity. Students who had never shown interest in xenobiology were suddenly passionate about predator studies. The dean had even shown up, along with several department heads and what appeared to be a news crew from Galactic Educational Broadcasting. Professor Klaxon stood at the podium, practically vibrating with nervous energy and academic ambition. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted non-binary consciousness entities," he announced, "today we witness something unprecedented. For the first time in Academy history, we will observe a live Earth apex predator in action." The audience held its collective breath. Grothnix clutched his protective armor. Shimmerax's crystalline body flickered with anxious light patterns. The blob creatures had formed what appeared to be a defensive huddle. "I present to you Captain Jake Murphy, expert in human-predator symbiosis, and his companion, the legendary Mr. Whiskers." The containment field shimmered as Jake walked into the lecture hall, carrying what looked like a standard pet transport container. The audience leaned forward, expecting to see something with fangs, claws, or at least an intimidating snarl. Jake set down the carrier and opened the door. Nothing happened. "Mr. Whiskers," Jake called softly. "Showtime, buddy." A few seconds later, a distinctly unimpressive orange tabby cat wandered out of the carrier, looked around at the 200 staring faces, and promptly sat down to start grooming his own foot. The silence in the lecture hall was deafening. "That's it?" whispered someone in the back row. Mr. Whiskers finished cleaning his foot, yawned widely enough to show off his pink tongue and tiny fangs, and then did something that would be analyzed by xenobiologists for decades to come. He flopped over onto his side and started purring. "Fascinating," Klaxon exclaimed, though his voice had gone up about 3 octaves. "Notice how the predator immediately establishes territorial dominance by claiming the center of our observation space." Jake watched his cat sprawl across the floor like a furry orange rug and decided to roll with it. "Yeah, that's classic apex predator behavior right there," he said in the most deadpan voice possible. "He's showing complete confidence in his ability to handle any threat in this environment. Notice how he's not even bothering to stand up. That's because he knows he's the most dangerous thing in this room." Several students frantically took notes. Mr. Whiskers stretched, extending his claws for exactly 3 seconds before retracting them and settling into what could only be described as the most relaxed position physically possible for a vertebrate. "The psychological warfare has already begun," Jake continued, warming to his theme. "He's demonstrating that he's so confident in his superiority that he can afford to be completely vulnerable. This is advanced intimidation tactics. He's basically telling everyone in this room that they're so far beneath his notice that he might as well take a nap." "Remarkable," breathed a Xentorian student. "The arrogance is terrifying." Mr. Whiskers chose that moment to start purring louder, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the lecture hall through the amplification system. "Oh no," whispered Shimmerax, her crystalline structure resonating with the purring frequency. "It's some kind of sonic weapon." "Actually," Jake said, "that's his contentment signal. It means he's happy." "Happy?" Grothnix squeaked. "Why is it happy?" Jake looked around the lecture hall full of terrified alien faces, then back at his completely relaxed cat. "Because he knows you're all afraid of him." This was completely untrue. Mr. Whiskers was happy because he'd found a nice warm spot under the lecture hall's heating system, and the floor was exactly the right temperature for optimal napping. But the audience didn't need to know that. "The predator feeds on fear," someone shouted from the middle rows. "Not literally." Jake clarified. It's more of a psychological thing. Professor Klaxon was frantically taking notes while trying to maintain his expert composure. Notice how the human maintains his position as Beta Pack leader, providing commentary to help us understand the predator's behavior patterns. Mr. Whiskers rolled over onto his back, exposing his fluffy belly to the entire audience. The gasps were audible. Is it showing us its vulnerable spots? Asked a trembling Rigelian. That's the most advanced psychological warfare I've ever witnessed, Jake said solemnly. He's so confident in his abilities that he's literally showing you exactly where you'd need to attack to hurt him, knowing that none of you would dare try it. This was also completely untrue. Mr. Whiskers was just enjoying the warmth and being his usual lazy self, but the alien audience was interpreting every normal cat behavior as evidence of sophisticated military strategy. The tactical genius is astounding, murmured the dean, who had been taking his own notes. It's like it's several moves ahead of us in some cosmic chess game. Mr. Whiskers opened one green eye, looked directly at the dean for exactly 2 seconds, then closed it again. Did you see that? The dean whispered urgently. It assessed me as a potential threat and dismissed me as irrelevant. Yeah, he does that, Jake confirmed. Mr. Whiskers has very high standards. The truth was that Mr. Whiskers had looked at the dean, determined he wasn't holding any food or interesting toys, and gone back to napping. But somehow this ordinary cat behavior was being interpreted as evidence of superior intelligence and tactical awareness. Professor Klaxon, called out a student from the upper rows, how do we defend ourselves against this level of psychological manipulation? Claxton, who was now taking notes faster than his tentacles could move, looked up with wild eyes. Honestly, I'm not sure anyone can defend against this. The creature appears to be operating on a level of strategic thinking that we can barely comprehend. Mr. Whiskers yawned again, stretched all 4 legs simultaneously, and settled deeper into his nap. His purring got even louder. He's entering deep tactical meditation, Jake announced, because at this point, why not? This is when Earth predators do their most dangerous thinking. The entire lecture hall leaned forward to observe Mr. Whiskers thinking dangerous thoughts, which mostly involved dreaming about a particularly interesting dust bunny he'd seen under Jake's bunk. What happened next would be studied in both xenobiology and crisis management courses for the next 50 years. Professor Klaxon, in his excitement to document every aspect of this unprecedented predator behavior, had activated every piece of recording and analysis equipment in the lecture hall. This included the standard holographic projectors, the multispectrum behavioral analyzers, and unfortunately, the classroom's laser pointer system that was used for highlighting important information on the display screens. As Klaxon gestured enthusiastically while explaining the tactical meditation process, his tentacle accidentally activated the laser pointer. A small red dot appeared on the wall behind Mr. Whiskers. The change in the cat was instantaneous and absolutely terrifying to anyone who didn't understand what they were witnessing. Mr. Whiskers went from completely relaxed to a state of focused intensity that would have impressed a military sniper. His pupils dilated to maximum size, his ears snapped forward, and every muscle in his orange body coiled like a spring. "Oh no," Jake muttered, recognizing the signs. "Professor, you might want to turn off that laser pointer." But it was too late. Mr. Whiskers had spotted the red dot. "Fascinating!" Klaxon shouted, completely missing Jake's warning. "The Predator has detected some kind of threat we can't even perceive. Look at that instant transformation from rest state to combat readiness." What followed was a masterclass in feline hunting behavior that sent 200 alien students into various states of panic. Mr. Whiskers launched himself at the wall with the athletic grace of a creature that had evolved specifically to catch small, fast-moving objects. His leap covered 15 feet and brought him within inches of the red dot, which promptly moved as Klaxon continued gesturing. "It's chasing something invisible," screamed Shimmerax, her crystalline body flashing warning colors so bright they activated the lecture hall's emergency lighting protocols. Mr. Whiskers followed the dot along the wall, his movements fluid and predatory in a way that his previous napping had definitely not suggested. He was focused, determined, and absolutely relentless in his pursuit of the mysterious red circle. "A creature can see into dimensions we cannot perceive," shouted Grofnix, his protective armor clattering as he tried to take cover behind his desk. "It's hunting interdimensional prey." "Actually," Jake started to explain, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of 200 aliens experiencing existential terror. The red dot moved across the ceiling, and Mr. Whiskers followed it with his eyes, tracking its movement with the precision of a guided missile system. When the dot stopped, he crouched low, wiggled his hindquarters in preparation, and launched himself at a wall display that was worth more than Jake's annual salary. "Incoming!" someone yelled as Mr. Whiskers sailed through the air in perfect hunting form. He missed the dot by inches, but succeeded in knocking a priceless Altarian crystal display off its mounting. The crystal shattered on the floor with a sound like a small explosion, and Mr. Whiskers landed gracefully next to the wreckage, still tracking the red dot's movement. "The Predator is destroying our technology," wailed a blob creature, pulling itself into a defensive ball. "It knows our weaknesses." "No, wait," Jake tried again, but Professor Klaxon was now in full academic hysteria mode. "Remarkable, absolutely remarkable. The creature is systematically identifying and eliminating potential threats in its environment. Notice how it targeted our most advanced equipment first." The red dot continued its journey across the lecture hall, now moving along the floor toward the student seating area. Mr. Whiskers stalked it with the focused intensity of a creature that was absolutely convinced this mysterious red circle was the most important thing in the universe. "It's coming this way!" shrieked a Zentorian, her crystalline head chiming at frequencies that probably violated several noise ordinances. "The invisible prey is leading it toward us." What followed could only be described as organized pandemonium. Students began evacuating their seats as Mr. Whiskers approached, following the laser dot with single-minded determination. But since they couldn't see what he was chasing, it looked like he was systematically hunting them based on some predatory algorithm they couldn't comprehend. "Everyone remain calm," Claxton shouted, which had exactly the opposite effect. "The Predator is simply demonstrating advanced hunting patterns. Take notes." Mr. Whiskers pounced on the red dot's location just as a nervous Regelian student stepped into his path. The collision wasn't violent, but it was unexpected enough to send both the student and the cat tumbling in different directions. "It's using us as we weapons against each other," the student yelled from the floor. Mr. Whiskers recovered from the tumble with typical cat dignity, which is to say he immediately sat down and began grooming himself as if the whole incident had been completely intentional and part of some larger plan. "The psychological warfare continues," Jake observed dryly. "Now he's pretending that was all part of his strategy." "Brilliant," gasped the dean. "It's maintaining tactical superiority even after a setback. The adaptability is incredible." But the red dot wasn't finished with them yet. Klaxon's continued gesturing kept the laser pointer active, and now the dot was moving up the wall toward the lecture hall's main lighting system. Mr. Whiskers spotted it immediately. What happened next violated several laws of physics and at least one building safety regulation. With a leap that would have impressed Olympic gymnasts across multiple species, Mr. Whiskers launched himself from the floor toward the ceiling mount lighting array, apparently convinced that this was where the mysterious red dot lived. "It's airborne!" someone screamed. Mr. Whiskers hit the lighting system with the precise grace of a guided missile, which, unfortunately, was also approximately the same effect on the equipment. Sparks flew, lights flickered, and several expensive holographic projectors died quick and expensive deaths. The lecture hall plunged into emergency lighting as Mr. Whiskers dangled briefly from the damaged light fixture, before dropping to the floor with a soft thud. "System failure," announced the computer's emergency voice, "initiating containment protocols." This triggered the backup safety systems that had been installed specifically for this demonstration. Containment fields activated, blast shields deployed, and emergency alarms began blaring throughout the academy. Through it all, Mr. Whiskers sat calmly in the middle of the chaos, licking his paw and washing behind his ears, as if destroying several thousand credits worth of equipment was just Tuesday for him. "The Predator has neutralized our entire technological infrastructure," whispered Grothnix, in awe. "It identified our dependence on artificial systems and eliminated them systematically. And now it's grooming itself," added Shimmerax, "like this was all just routine maintenance." Jake looked around at the smoking equipment, the activated containment fields, the emergency lighting, and the 200 terrified aliens, then looked down at his cat, who was now purring contentedly. "Yeah," he said, "that's pretty much exactly what just happened." The laser pointer, mercifully, had finally been damaged enough to shut off automatically. But the damage was done. Mr. Whiskers had gone from sleepy Housecat to legendary tactical genius in the space of 5 minutes. And the entire academy had witnessed his demonstration of Earth's superior evolutionary strategy. Professor Claxton, standing in the wreckage of his lecture hall with his 7 spectacles askew and his tentacles trembling with excitement, raised his voice above the emergency alarms. "Class dismissed, but remember, your assignment is to write a 1,000-word analysis of what we've witnessed here today. This changes everything we thought we knew about predator-prey relationships." As the students filed out in hushed, terrified groups, Jake picked up Mr. Whiskers, who immediately began purring and rubbing against Jake's chin. "Well, buddy," Jake said quietly, "I think we just accidentally convinced an entire alien civilization that Earthcats are the ultimate weapon." Mr. Whiskers purred louder and closed his eyes, completely satisfied with a job well done, even though he had absolutely no idea what job that was. 3 months later, Jake Murphy found himself in the surreal position of being the most famous human in the galaxy, and it was all because of a fat orange tabby who was currently asleep in a patch of artificial sunlight. The Galactic Academy had not only rebuilt Lecture Hall 7 with predator-resistant equipment, but had also constructed an entirely new wing dedicated to what they now called Earth Predator Studies. The Department of Xenobiology had received the largest funding increase in Academy history, and Professor Claxon had been promoted to Dean of Interspecies Combat Psychology. "Captain Murphy," Claxon said during their weekly consultation meeting, "the applications for your course are beyond anything we've ever seen. We have students from 47 different star systems wanting to study human apex predator symbiosis dynamics." Jake looked over at Mr. Whiskers, who was demonstrating advanced tactical sleeping by sprawling across 3 chairs simultaneously. "You know he's just a regular cat, right?" Yes," Claxton nodded knowingly, making notes with 4 tentacles, while adjusting his spectacles with the other 3. "The just a regular psychological deflection tactic. Brilliant way to maintain operational security about your species' biological weapons program." Jake had given up trying to explain. The pay was too good, the accommodations were excellent, and Mr. Whiskers seemed to genuinely enjoy his new role as Apex Predator Emeritus of the Galactic Academy. Mostly because it came with unlimited access to the Academy's premium food dispensers and several dedicated napping spots. The course catalog now listed Jake's class as Advanced Earth Predator Psychology, Understanding the Human-Feline Combat Partnership. Students paid extra tuition for the privilege of observing Mr. Whiskers' tactical demonstrations, which mostly consisted of him sleeping in increasingly creative positions. "Today, we observe the Predator's Energy Conservation Protocol," Jake would announce to his packed lecture hall. "Notice how he can remain in standby mode for up to 18 hours while maintaining full situational awareness." This was completely true. Mr. Whiskers could indeed sleep for 18 hours straight, and he did somehow always know when the food dispenser activated, even from 3 rooms away. The students interpreted this as evidence of supernatural sensory capabilities. "Professor Murphy," asked Grothnix, who had become one of Jake's most dedicated students, "why does the predator sometimes stare at empty walls?" Jake watched Mr. Whiskers track something invisible across the ceiling with intense focus. "He's monitoring dimensional fluctuations that your species can't perceive," Jake explained solemnly. "Earth predators evolved the ability to see beyond the normal spectrum of reality." The truth was that Mr. Whiskers was probably watching dust motes or possibly hallucinating, the way cats sometimes did. But the alien students frantically took notes about interdimensional hunting capabilities and perception beyond the visible spectrum. The Academy had also instituted what they called the Mr. Whiskers Protocol, a comprehensive safety system for dealing with Earth predators. This included specialized containment fields, emergency response procedures, and a dedicated team of xenobiologists whose job was to interpret predator behavioral patterns. "Sir," reported Dr. Blixnorp, the head of the new Earth Predator Research Division, "we've documented over 300 distinct behaviors in the specimen, each apparently serving a different tactical function." Jake looked at their detailed behavioral analysis chart, which included entries like tactical stretching, threat assessment, strategic grooming, psychological intimidation, and combat purring, sonic disorientation. "Yeah, he's got a lot of different moves," Jake agreed. And the research team had spent weeks analyzing Mr. Whiskers' daily routine, interpreting every yawn as a territory marking vocalization, and every trip to the litter box as strategic resource management. They'd published 17 academic papers on his sleeping patterns alone. But the real breakthrough came when the Academy's Department of Military Strategy got involved. "Captain Murphy," announced General Thrixnax of the Galactic Defense Corps, "we'd like to discuss potential applications of Earth predator tactics in our defense protocols." Jake blinked. "You want to use cat behavior for military strategy?" "The psychological warfare applications are obvious," the general continued, "but we're particularly interested in the tactical indifference approach your predator demonstrated. The ability to project such complete confidence in the face of superior numbers could revolutionize battlefield psychology." So now Jake found himself consulting for the Galactic Defense Corps on Earth predator military applications. His seminars on strategic napping and intimidation through calculated laziness were attended by military leaders from across the galaxy. The key to the Earth Predator's success, Jake would explain to rooms full of decorated officers, is absolute confidence in their own superiority. They don't fight because they don't need to fight. Their enemies defeat themselves through fear of what the Predator might do. This was, surprisingly, actually decent military psychology, even though Jake had originally made it up to explain why his cat spent most of his time asleep. The most unexpected development was the Academy's new Predator Partnership Program. After witnessing the supposed human-feline combat alliance, dozens of alien species had begun requesting their own Earth Predator companions. The waiting list for cats is now over 2 years, reported the Academy's procurement officer. We've had to establish breeding programs on 14 different worlds. Jake imagined thousands of confused housecats being worshipped as tactical geniuses across the galaxy, and decided he was okay with this development. At least the cats would be well fed and pampered. Mr. Whiskers had adapted to his fame with typical feline grace, which is to say he ignored it completely and continued living his best life. He'd gained a little weight from all the premium alien food, developed a preference for the Academy's heated floors, and had somehow trained the research staff to provide chin scratches on demand. The Predator has successfully established dominance over our entire faculty, Professor Klaxon observed with genuine admiration. We're all essentially his support staff now. This was absolutely true. The Academy's most brilliant minds now organized their schedules around Mr. Whiskers' nap times, feeding schedule, and litter box maintenance requirements. He'd accidentally created the most sophisticated cat care operation in galactic history. "You know," Jake said to Mr. Whiskers during one of their evening conversations, "Uncle Pete always said you were special. I just never imagined you'd end up being the most famous cat in the galaxy." Mr. Whiskers purred, rubbed against Jake's leg, and then walked over to his favorite chair, the one that used to belong to the Dean of Advanced Sciences before Mr. Whiskers decided it was his. The final touch came when the Academy commissioned an official portrait of Mr. Whiskers for their Hall of Distinguished Faculty. The painting showed him in a regal pose, staring off into the distance, with an expression of profound wisdom and tactical awareness. In reality, he'd been watching a maintenance robot clean the windows, but the artist had captured something that looked appropriately mysterious and predatory. Below the portrait, a brass plaque read, "Mr. Whiskers, Earth's apex predator, teacher, tactician, and master of psychological warfare." Jake stood in front of the portrait with his arms crossed, watching students from across the galaxy stop to pay their respects to what was essentially a picture of his napping cat. "Well, Mr. Whiskers," he said quietly, "I think we've accidentally proven that the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or superior firepower. It's the absolute confidence to take a nap in front of 200 strangers and somehow convince them you're the most dangerous thing they've ever seen." Mr. Whiskers, who was sitting nearby in a patch of artificial sunlight, opened one green eye, looked at Jake with an expression that clearly communicated his opinion that this had always been obvious, and went back to sleep. And somewhere in the Academy's archives, a note was filed away for future researchers. Earth's apex predators possess the remarkable ability to achieve total victory through the strategic application of doing absolutely nothing. This may represent the most advanced form of psychological warfare ever documented. The note was filed under classified, potentially dangerous information, which, considering the source was a housecat named Mr. Whiskers, who had just discovered that the Academy's food dispensers could be activated by sitting on them, was probably the most accidentally accurate military assessment in galactic history.